And tight junctions are required for life. If these tight junctions didn't exist, if anything in the bloodstream could just go straight through, past the endothelium and into the tissues and organs behind, you would be dead like that.
Right.
And we know you would be dead because there is a disease where that happens, and that's called Ebola.
Right.
And the Ebola virus, for whatever reason, it opens up tight junctions between endothelial cells and allows everything to escape. That's why it's called hemorrhagic fever, and your eyeballs go bloody and things go bloody, because your entire body disintegrates at that point. That's how it kills you. And it kills you because it opens up tight junctions. So we know that if tight junctions are not tight, you die.
Yes. Yes.
And yet the argument is, oh, well, the LDL goes between cells through these tight junctions where there is no junction. These tight junctions stop single ions, which would be like the size of a grain of sand next to a human being.
Yeah.
So it can control the passage of a grain of sand, yet it can't control the passage of a human being. Though this is clearly nonsensical.
Yeah.
It just absolutely makes no sense. So people say, oh, well, the junctions open up. And you go, well, I can believe if you've damaged the junction, if you've damaged endothelial cells, the junctions will open up, but then everything can get through.
Yeah.
Red blood cells, white blood cells, water, albumin, you name it, it's through. It's rushing through, and everything will go through. All right.
Yeah.
So why just LDL? Why is it specifically one molecule, a very large molecule, a huge molecule? Why is it this one that can go through and nothing else? The other thing that people don't know is that all blood vessels are supplied, large blood vessels are supplied by their own blood vessels called vasa vasorum, the blood vessels of the blood vessels.
Wow, I did not know that. Yeah.
And in your big arteries, the arteries that get atherosclerosis sized, little blood vessels form a lattice work around the blood vessel, and they go into the blood vessel and they all the way around in the blood vessel to provide it with the nutrients it needs, otherwise it would die. And the interesting thing is, and whilst I've talked about this barrier function, once blood vessels get very small, the barrier function starts to break down, as it has to, because in very small blood vessels in your kidneys, for example, if the waste products couldn't leak out and into the nephron and all that, kidneys couldn't work. All that would happen is the blood would go into the kidney and come out of the kidney, and nothing would have happened.
Yeah.
So when very small blood vessels, they have things called fenestrations, which fenestra, a window, they've got holes in them, and the basement underlying them opens up, so things can move in and out of very small blood vessels. So all arteries and all veins, there's more vasa vasorum in veins, are filled with vasa vasorum, from which all sorts of things can leak in and out, including, of course, LDL. So actually, why doesn't the LDL leak out from behind, if you like, into the artery wall? And if it's doing that, why doesn't it do in the vein wall?
Yeah.
And again, if you asked 100 doctors, have they heard of the vasa vasorum? 99.9 would never have heard of this stuff. And when they were doing this research originally, when the hypothesis existed, they didn't know there was vasa vasorum. They didn't know there was LDL. They didn't know there were tight junctions. They'd never heard of transcytosis. They didn't know there were endothelial progenitor cells. They never heard of nitric oxide. It's just like, well, yeah, all that stuff, but it's still the same thing. They didn't even heard. There's another thing that no one's ever heard of. It's called the glycocalyx, which is a gigantically important physiological structure in your body. As I say, if you try and pick up a fish, most fish, not sharks, you try and pick up a fish, it slips between your fingers. It slips between your fingers because it's covered in a thing called glycocalyx, which is 1,000 times slippier than Teflon, right? And it's made up of little strands of protein and sugar. It's called glycoproteins, and it's a little wavy forest, and it's designed to protect the underlying endothelium from things banging into it. It's also incredibly anticoagulant, so everything can smoothly move over it. And inside it, there's all sorts of hormones and enzymes. It's just a gigantically complicated thing.